PwC. Thank you to our judges, Yatt Burke from Cisco, Royce Peretti from Deloitte, Ian Dunn from the Richard Ivey School of Business, Shanna McNair from McNair Business Development, Jonathan Ricci from PwC, and Richard Probert from PwC. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes for questions. I will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time, and will stop the speaker who exceeds the time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking are permitted by the audience. The audience is only permitted to applaud following Q&A. The audience is also banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university, and we will ask you to exit the room immediately following question and answer period. Competitors, you may begin when you are ready.
The growth of the big box store business plan has resulted in a nationwide population of people who eat at the same restaurants, wear the same clothes, and even drink the same tasteless, bland beer. However, the introduction of this craft beer industry has resulted in the opportunity for these individuals to be able to express their individuality, try unique, flavorful beer, all while supporting a local, socially conscious business. Your company has done a great job of capitalizing on this new market trend. So thank you very much, Mr. Wall and Mr. Wilson, for having us here today. My name is May, and I'm here today with my associates on behalf of Pat from Craft LLP. So let's go through the agenda for today. We took a look at the files you provided for us, and we believe these were key areas of problems or areas of concern. Most importantly, that cost control. So you asked us for that analysis and a recommendation. So we will be going through a few of your cost control methods and giving you a few recommendations for how better to account for your costs and, of course, make your business more profitable. That expansion. Should you acquire Don's Restaurant and Bar in the North City? Should you start a new brew pub in Western City? And should you pursue both, perhaps selling that smaller city location in order to finance this? Which brings us to the financing section. You have the opportunity to borrow $900,000 at a rate of 4%. However, you also have the option again to sell that smaller city location to raise funds. How is this going to impact your financial statements? Obviously, the interest is something to think about. In addition, is selling your business really the right decision? Are you going to lose more money selling that and losing those revenues as you would on that interest expense? And last but not least, what percentage of your alcohol, of that gross profit, should you donate? You're currently donating that 1%, but you have expressed interest in donating more. We love this initiative. We think it fits great with your brand vision, your core set of values, and we'd like to see you increase it more. Because you're already sitting in that return on assets rate of about 20%, actually any profits you make realistically can be donated. But we believe that with further analysis, we'll be able to increase this 1% rate quite a lot. So again, with those issues we mentioned, that main problem is how can you best take the next step in your business to increase profitability, to help the economy a little bit more, and of course to donate more to the Students Against Drunk Driving. So our recommendation is that you indeed do some brew costing. So we'd like you to cost more of your individual brews, find out what each individual brew is costing you. We want you to indeed go on with that expansion. We want you to acquire Don's Restaurant and Bar, but do not acquire the Western City Bar or brew pub. We want you to obtain that loan, but not sell your smaller city location of business. And we want you to increase your donations to 10% of gross profit by the year 2016.
As part of our due diligence, in terms of the services that we're providing your company, we did a thorough analysis of your business, looking at your industry and the current state of that industry, looking at what strengths you need to utilize, the weaknesses you need to overcome, the opportunities that is there for you given your current state, and the threats that may undermine your different plans and your vision. So your strength is that you are two entrepreneurs that are really passionate about this business. You have the proper background, and you sell craft premium beer, locally produced and produced from scratch. There is nothing that you do that is from processed malt, and this really differentiates you from other breweries and other brew pubs in the industry. Also, you have 3 locations in Western City, and this is a growing population with a steady demand that we foresee will continue to rise later on. You have one in smaller city, and this gives you a little bit of room to really spread out. Also, you contribute 1% of your profits from your alcohol consumption to SAD, which really gives you that positive image, given that you are making money out of alcohol consumption. You also maximize job opportunities because you are in that western city and really focus in that area. However, the weaknesses that you need to look at is that Western City has become saturated. Given that there's a 10% increase in terms of the growth of the industry, this is something that you really need to consider. There's already too many people and too many microbreweries that are starting in that area, and so you really need to look at that. The cost control improvements that you have mentioned as you have came from that seminar is also something you need to consider to see if it's really efficient, the processes that you are doing, and which ones of these brews really make the most money so you can make proper job costing and managerial accounting decisions later on. In terms of opportunities, like I said, craft beer segment grows by 10%, and there's an empty northern market out there. If you continue and proceed with this decision, you would be the first one to introduce premium craft beers in this area. However, in terms of the threats, like I said, it was very saturated, but most importantly, macro breweries are looking at entering their business. Macro breweries are placing their names and pretending that they're not these big name boxes. They're looking at competing with you without telling the entire market. So this is something you really need to consider. Also, we did a thorough financial analysis looking at the different gross margin percentages. So with your beer segment, your gross margin percentage is at 84%. Your liquor, which includes wine, is 82%. And your food, which makes sense to be at 45% because this is not your core competency in the business. We got this by taking our gross margin divided by sales revenue and really looking at the different segments that you are producing. Your current ratio is at 3.78, taking your current assets to your liabilities, how much you can turn over those current assets. With working capital at around $1 million, looking at how much capital you still have as much as when you cover your current liabilities. You have a lot of cash in your balance sheet, and this is something that you can take advantage of by these different options that we are looking at today. Return on asset is at 21.9%, which you told us to look and compare to the 20%, which is your threshold, by giving this 1% to SAT.
So now let's take a look at those cost controls. So after a brief analysis of your cost controls based on the industry average, we came to find that your numbers are on par, if not better, than most of the industry average for main ingredients such as malt, hops, yeast, even utilities. So the costs themselves are not the issue. You seem to be doing great with those. What the problem is that you're introducing new brews each time. Of course, being a craft manufacturer, each brew is different, diverse, has many different ingredients. Because of that, all these brews are going to have different costs associated with them. So an average blanket cost for brews is just not enough information to make really viable decisions for your company. Another important fact is the cold storage. So it does take up to 10 days to store this. That is part of the manufacturing process for your beer, as it does make it taste better. So this should be part of the manufacturing cost and that product cost. As I mentioned, we want you to track that inventory cost per brew in order to make better decisions. With just that brew average right now, you can't really tell which brews are more profitable as compared to others. Because they do have those different ingredients, some might have a much larger variable cost than others. And last but not least, we did calculate a break-even point for you, which is about 7,900 hectoliters of beer for you, compared with the 9,000 that you are producing, so you are doing great for production. As I mentioned, your costs are quite low. You're doing great in terms of profitability. We just want you to get a better handle on keeping track of those costs, so you know where your profitability lies and where you could save some more money as well.
Going forward with this decision about how you're going to expand, we considered 3 very important criteria that we kept in mind and want you to keep in mind as well. The first is profitability. Of course, as accountants, we're concerned about the profit. So is this expansion going to have a positive NPV? Is it worth the money that you're going to put in, or are you going to make a positive return? Second is sustainability. Will this expansion have a long-term positive effect? Is it only going to bring you profit in the first 3 years, or is it going to be profitable over the long term? And also, very importantly, will this expansion decrease your sales and revenues at your other locations? Because now you're taking customers from one location to the next. And lastly, the vision. Is this project consistent with your company's vision and goals? So we've considered the 3 alternatives we mentioned earlier. First, you could acquire Don's Restaurant and Bar for the $850,000 for 100% of their shares. Second is the Western City location. You could open a new brew pub in Western City, a place where you currently already have 3 locations and a population of only 400,000 people. And third, you could do both. You could acquire DRB and open a new brew pub in that Western City. So in looking at expanding to Don's Restaurant and Pub,
we did calculate a projected gross profit. And as you can see, the gross profit is positive in all 5 years. It's number bolded at the bottom there. And in order to do this, we have considered separately and individually sales for the food, the liquor, and as well as the beer. So we did calculate gross margin for each three, sum them up to get this total gross profit here, which is positive. The assumptions we used are the assumptions you gave to us, as well as the ones we've listed here. So we've assumed that liquor sales will decrease by 20% in the first year because you're getting rid of those bottled beers. We've also assumed that growth of 10%, which is consistent with the current market growth. And we've also assumed that food sales are going to remain constant. They aren't going to increase. As like we said before, that's not your core competency or your area of focus. So through this, we come up with a positive NPV of 1.4 million. So after we looked at the gross profit, we took out depreciation expense and other expenses that aren't included in the product cost, come up with a net income, took out our tax expense to get your net income after tax. And it is a positive NPV of 1.4 million. Currently, to purchase this, it's only going to cost you $850,000. So it is worth more than the asking price, which is something very, very valuable for you as a company. Again, we did assume that the depreciation would remain constant. What we mean by this is there already are some assets you're going to obtain from the company. We're not sure how much useful life those assets have or what kind of depreciation method they were using. So we have just assumed that the depreciation would remain at a constant rate that we have seen given this year, and that it would last another 10 years. And for your new assets you'll be acquiring, we have assumed a depreciation rate of 10 years. So looking at, does this project meet the criteria? Is it profitable? Yes. The NPV is greater than the acquisition cost. It also shows an 80% gross margin in the bar segment, a 56% in the food category. So it is very profitable. Is it sustainable? We believe yes. We don't currently have any locations in the northern city. You'll be the first company to enter this market where there's a population looking for something of this sort. They're tired of going to Moxie's and Earls. They want something that's new, that's different, that offers them that beer, that lets them express themselves. You know, they're from that hipster generation, and this is something that they're really interested in. And is it consistent with your vision? Yes. One of the things that you're really happy about with your location in Western cities is that you're able to provide jobs. With this new location, you're going to be able to maximize job opportunities. With opening a new restaurant, you can hire management, servers, bartenders, dishwashers. You can offer many different job opportunities. So in the end, we recommend yes, do acquire Don's Restaurant and Bar.
Let's look at your other option, Western City Pub. So there is reason that you have suggested this, because it will be in a shopping mall that you don't currently have access to. However, you really need to look into how saturated that market is, and how many microbreweries and brew pubs have already started because of how profitable you are. So again, the different criteria we have with profitability, yes, it still has an NPV of $960,000, which you can see in our appendices and calculations. However, like I said, it's very saturated, and you're competing with yourself and specifically because you already have 3 locations there. So it doesn't matter just because you are a few hundred meters away. People are not going to just feel good because there's something close by. You are there because you have premium beer, and people will go to you whether you're close by to their workplace or you're even further away. Like I said, do not acquire Western City Pub. This is what we concluded on, also because this is something that you cannot afford. This is $850,000 for 100% of the shares, and you also thought about getting both Western City Pub and Northern. However, that you can only afford if you also sell your small city business. And this is something that you should take into consideration as we go on in our presentation. All right, so again, moving on to that is financing. So the cost of DRB, which is the one that we want you to acquire, is $850,000 for 100%. And your new equipment is at $250,000. So we want you to take this loan. We want you to maximize this loan at 4% using the effective interest method, with interest expense decreasing net income and your net profit value. Annual interest payments will decrease your net cash inflow. However, we believe that this is going to make you profits later on because we know that this is something that's new to the area, and this is something of a very profitable experience, as again, this is your premium craft beer that you really know how to do. Like I said earlier, you can take your $900,000 and purchase both. However, you can only purchase both if you sell your small city business. Let's talk about SAD. So again, because it's alcohol consumption that you rely your business on, you want to help those affected by drunk driving. And so we want you to remain at 1% because of your criteria that this should be an after-tax gross margin of 20% in return of assets. And so when you look at that, that's 15% in the first year of operations, which is in 2014, and 18% in 2015. So we recommend that in 2016, that's the time that you can increase it to 10%, in which you're still going to be really profitable. Now let's think about your exit strategy. We don't want to talk about this in the risk because this is something that you can actually manage. Given that, again, this is like a fashion trend that people love craft premium beer, you really need to think about in the future where you want this business to go if you want to scale down or maybe remove and retire from this business. So stagnated growth and forecasted to peak in 5 years is something that you really need to be concerned about. A lot of different news publications already say that this business is going to, has reached its peak already and is not going to continue to have increasing demand. So we think that you should sell equipment to macro breweries and that you should convert slower locations to restaurant businesses.
So let's take a look at the timeline. What do you need to accomplish and when do you need to do it by? In the short term, we'd like you to begin that brew costing. Start job costing, making certain how much these jobs are costing you, which beers are more effective than others. We'd also like you to purchase Don's restaurant right away and start capitalizing on those returns. Keep that smaller city brew pub, as Jessa mentioned, because that NPV from keeping the smaller one is actually going to be higher than acquiring another Western brew pub. And we'd also like you to promote the new location. It's a big fad within the craft beer industry to host beer tastings, competitions. In addition, a lot of associations will sponsor this. We believe it's a very low-cost method to help you get that word out and help publicize within that north location. In the long term, we'd like you to increase your donation to the Students Against Drunk Driving to 10%. As you see fit, you can increase it further. You do have excessive cash flows. We'd also like you to invest in R&D to be more energy efficient. We believe this fits really well with your core competencies and your core vision of your company. Because the microbrewery industry and because that beer pub industry does involve a lot of energy and water use, we believe it would fit quite well if you invested in R&D and found a way to strategically use less resources in order to make your product environmentally friendly as well. So that takes us to a little bit more beyond those numbers. So we've already established this is indeed going to be a very profitable endeavor for you. You can expand and grow your business to a large capacity. However, we'd like you to maintain that ethical, that more sustainable vision that you've always had. With the ethics, again, donate 10% of your alcohol sales to those Students Against Drunk Driving. Again, it'll be increased with growth as you see fit. In an economical way. By moving to the North City, you're able to give more jobs to a new city and help the economy out in the North City. Environmentally, again, we'd like you to minimize that high usage of water and energy by investing in R&D and developing a more energy efficient way.
As with any plan, there are some risks associated with the one we're suggesting today. One risk is that the forecasted demand is too high. A way to manage this risk is to do consistent marketing tactics. So Sarah mentioned some of those brand tasting events or hosting special drink features on special nights. So we do recommend that you do have consistent marketing tactics. But in the case of this management is not successful and your demand is still not nearly as high as you forecasted, you could consider closing that location that we mentioned in a small city and focus on the demand where it currently already exists. A second risk is that if the key ingredient prices increase. As a company that relies very heavily on your beer sales, if certain of those ingredients become very, very expensive, it can be very, very costly and damaging to your company. To manage this, we suggest you take out futures contracts on the specific ingredients that you need that tend to fluctuate often and are expensive. And if this does not work, to mitigate the risk, we can experiment with alternative grains and try and find some products that are less expensive and fluctuate less often. But what is the impact of all the things we're suggesting today? How does it relate back to what we told you in the beginning? The first, it utilizes your strengths. So it really does help, we're going to continue using your healthy gross margin as we go into these new different locations. We're going to continue using those local inputs in new locations where consumers are going to be excited to use them. We're going to maximize job opportunities, and we're going to continue to contribute that 10% to SADD. It's also going to overcome our weaknesses. We're moving away from that saturated area in the Western city, and we're implementing those cost controls. It capitalizes on your opportunities. The segment is growing by 10%, and with expanding, we're helping to capitalize on that growth. It's also, there's that empty northern market, which you're going to be entering. And finally, it mitigates your threats. The saturated industry, you're moving away from. The beer industry in decline, well, you're moving into the craft beer segment, where there currently isn't any competitors. And the macro breweries, they're always going to be a threat. But if you move into that northern market first and really establish your brand, you already have an advantage over them.
All right, so in conclusion, with all those issues we mentioned, we believe that by focusing on your core competencies, by picking strategic opportunities to go into, and by maximizing your profitability, by ensuring you have cost controls and proper ways to manage your costs, you will continue to be successful in the long term. With that, I'd like to open the floor to any questions you may have.
Just a question on, because you mentioned the saturation of the Western City, but then when we look at the NPV, it's about $1 million NPV. So how do you bridge the two?
Well, what we believe is that that project, if you were to open the one in the Western City, that NPV that you're gaining there, you're taking away from one of your other projects. So the $1 million NPV of the new location, you're going to lose that $1 million from one of your already locations. Having 4 locations and a population of only 400,000 people makes it very hard to keep all 4 locations sustainable.
Did you quantify what that smaller city operations were to you?
Yes.
You mentioned it was, what was it?
It's actually in our appendices over here. And so our net present value is around 1.1 million, and the purchase price that somebody has hinted to is around $900,000. So we don't think that it is valuable for you to sell it, if they're going to pay less for that. And again, you're only going to sell it if you want to acquire Western City, which Jenna has already talked about the different weaknesses in that strategy.
With purchasing the northern, or sorry, whichever one has to speak, how is that going to affect our financial statements? Do we have an option that they're asking that we can actually look into?
So we do have an example of the financial statements here, just how it would affect it. Obviously, one big thing that will affect it is that interest expense. So we'll just kind of show you here. We did go through the sales by gross profit, but the depreciation expense and the interest expense that is a result of this, obviously as a result of the loan, is going to make the biggest impact. However, we did calculate those ratios for you. You still are very profitable. That return on assets is still well above that 20% you indicated.
In terms of the Students Against Drunk Driving recommendation there, currently we're donating 1% of gross profit on alcohol sales, and your recommendation is 10% of sales going to Students Against Drunk Driving. So I'm just looking, that's quite a jump, so if you could justify or walk me through your thought process for how you arrived at that.
So there might have been a typo in our PowerPoint. It should be 10% of the gross profit. And the justification there is you want to have a 20% return on assets, which you currently already have. You're at 22% actually. So once you open this new location, all that gross profit is really just extra money. So if you wanted to still retain your 20% return on assets, technically you could almost donate all of those profits away that you're getting from the new location. We don't suggest that as a viable business option. I mean, it's a possibility if you really want to go beyond profits, but we do believe that a 10% increase of the gross profit is achievable.
Is this a year to increase that goal given your aggressive expansion? Sure.
Sorry, so the increase in that donation won't occur until the 3rd year. So within those first 2 years, obviously those expansion costs are quite high. We still have included in our calculations at 1%, so you don't have to stop donating at all, but by the 3rd year you will be able to increase.
I found it interesting just on the exit strategy. Maybe just to clarify it for me, it seems like we're thinking in 5 years to sell equipment, convert to a restaurant business, yet our margins in the restaurant business seem to be a lot lower. So I just wanted to understand what the context for this specific recommendation was.
I don't think we specified that in 5 years this is something that you should do. This is something that you consider given that the 5-year forecast is that this will decline. And we're also not saying that you're going to convert it into a restaurant, but maybe sell it to a restaurant business once expand. Because you're a premium quality beer, your location is already top level, and this is something that they would get attracted to. You're also located in good locations in Western City Pub, so this is something that you can sell off. But we also think that the equipment you can sell to macro breweries only if you see fit, given the different demand forecast at that time.
Just on the exit strategy, you say in 5 years that, I guess, growth will start to taper off. But in a smaller city, we're already seeing stagnant growth. Should we not exit now from smaller cities?
So the projections do still show very profitable, obviously, revenues for the smaller city. So based on those forecasts, obviously it would be perhaps financially foolish to sell the smaller city right now. That exit strategy, I guess, just to clarify this, it was not in 5 years, let's sell all the businesses. It was if, growth happens to taper off, if, it does become stagnant in Western City and Northern City, you might not see the need for 4 microbreweries or micro pub stores, so maybe cut down to 2 or 3 or 1 as you see fit. So wherever until that break-even point becomes the point where you're not making profit.